Coming up on Maine Challenge, my conversation with Maine youth climate activists about the election and what's coming up. Good morning and welcome to Maine Challenge. I'm Betsy Sweet, your host this week, and I am thrilled to be joined by Riley Stevenson, Ania Wright, and Andrew Blunt, who are climate activists who have been activists for a long time here in Maine, and were particularly involved in this year's election. So I am thrilled to have you all. Thank you so much in a busy time. And let me say to everyone, I hope you're having wonderful holidays and adjusting, because I know it's different for everyone, and really hoping that we have a great new year and that the new year brings in a lot of change and a lot of light and definitely a lot of improvement over the one that we've had. So, so thank you guys so much for being with me. I'm really happy to have you.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So let's just start. We have lots to talk about, but let's just start, if you would, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and sort of give me a little bit, tell people a little bit about what inspired you to be an activist around climate. And I know you're active around a lot of things, so and whatever else you want to talk about, but just a little bit how you got there and why and what inspires you and what keeps you going. So Ania, let's start with you.
Sure. My name is Ania Wright, and I am living up in Bar Harbor, and I've been a climate activist for a couple years now. Currently I'm working as the youth representative on the Maine Climate Council, and then I'm also working separately as a grassroots climate action organizer for the Sierra Club Maine chapter. Generally I do a lot of organizing with young people around the state, and climate action work. And really, I have been interested in climate change and how to solve it for quite some years, since I was a young child, but I really didn't get involved in climate activism until college, when I had the privilege of being able to attend the UN climate conference in Katowice, Poland, and really started to learn more in depth about all the broad systemic issues that we're facing when it comes to climate change.
How global it is, yeah. Oh, awesome, great. Andrew, let's go to you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having us today, Betsy. So my name is Andrew Blunt. I am currently in South Portland, Maine. I work with Maine Youth for Climate Justice on their communications work, as well as working with grassroots organizers across climate and environmentalist groups around the state. I've been working with them for a little while now, and have been involved with climate activism for a couple of years. Been interested in environmental issues for just about as long as I can remember. I think one of my earliest memories was pestering my family about investing in solar panels, which they still have yet to do, but it's a good fight.
Okay.
Through Maine Youth for Climate Justice, I've been able to get involved with some legislative work that I'm really excited about this session, as well as been working on the CMP issue. So really excited to talk about this past election, and looking forward to it.
Awesome, thanks, Andrew. And Riley.
Yeah, so I am currently living in Waldoboro, and I'm a senior at Lincoln Academy. So I'm from Lincoln County, love LCTV. And I got involved in climate activism when I moved, several years after I moved to Maine. I moved here when I was 10 and sort of instantly fell in love with all of the amazing outdoors and the water and the woods and everything that Maine has to offer, and sort of realized halfway through high school I really wanted to do something about it. So joined some school groups, and then eventually got caught up in some of the statewide stuff with Maine Youth Climate Strikes and Maine Youth for Climate Justice, and sort of in the process realized that while it is so crucial to conserve sort of the amazing things about Maine, it's also so crucial that we acknowledge the many intersectionalities with so many other injustices that climate change holds. And so I sort of began learning and realizing that although the things that I care about are important, there are also so many other people who are so much more affected by the climate crisis, and sort of started doing that sort of work. And now I work a lot more locally and sort of regionally in the mid-coast area in Maine, trying to connect high school groups and sort of students and just get them involved in this fight, because every aspect of it really counts and every action is important.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, that's awesome. Thank you all for doing all what you're doing. So let's turn. And so, when we look at what happened in November, and, youth climate activists around the country were so active and so involved in this electoral cycle, and it was fantastic. And I know that Ed Markey, the senator from Massachusetts, really credits the Sunrise Movement and the youth climate movement with his victory over Kennedy in his primary, and made thousands of calls. I just read yesterday that in the Georgia race, that Sunrise nationally made like 1.5 million calls to young people in Georgia. So, I mean, what you're doing is incredible. That said, tell me, I know, at least for some of you, that the primary for both president and in Maine, the Senate, was a big disappointment, or was not the person who was the people who were most interested in climate change and doing something about it, and the intersectionalities, Riley, that you talked about, did not win. So tell me what that was like, and how you all, how you made the transition, or was it easy to make the transition to keep people involved and keep them psyched when this, when it wasn't the first choice? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Go ahead, Ania. I see you're gonna.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the primaries were really a large disappointment for many youth climate activists. I know at Maine Youth for Climate Justice, we had endorsed Bernie Sanders and endorsed you, Betsy, for the Senate seat. And so there was so much hope that was tied into those endorsements, and pushing for candidates that were really taking a look at these systemic issues that Riley mentioned. And so it was a disappointment that they didn't end up the way that they did, but or that they didn't end up as we wanted. But I think, there's still possibility with these more mainstream candidates like Joe Biden, to push them to be more progressive when it comes to things like climate change. And I think we've seen that with Joe Biden, and with groups like Sunrise Movement and other youth climate groups that have really pushed his administration already to be really bold on climate change, and to include voices that aren't necessarily, the most moderate voices, but instead more progressive voices within some of those cabinet positions and things like that. So I think, while it was disappointing, I think there's still hope. And when I think about it compared to the alternative of administration, it's much better.
Put that on the table, yes.
Yeah.
We can say it is way better than the alternative. So absolutely. But Andrew, when you were thinking about it, that sort of disappointment, sort of were there specific things that you were able to do to help people translate? Because from my perspective, we've worked, and we being old progressive people, have worked really hard to try and get young people involved and get them interested in electoral politics. I mean, you do amazing work everywhere, and it's honestly, a lot of young people I talk to say, Betsy, why bother? It doesn't matter, and it's always, they're both the same, and whatever, it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. So and then we have a primary in which what people say they care about, healthcare and climate change, isn't matched by the candidates that they elect. And so Andrew, have you guys had conversations about that? Do you have but you guys stayed in. So how did that happen?
I think that's a really great question, Betsy. Honestly, something that has been impressive for me is that lasting engagement and commitment to the process, even beyond what you could say are disappointing primary outcomes. I think, like you said, I have also heard this narrative of, electoral politics continue to produce suboptimal candidates for youth, and so why should we continue to participate in this way? Why not allocate our resources, our time, our energy elsewhere? That said, I think at the end of the day, there is a lot of change to be made at that level of electoral politics, and youth do recognize a certain pragmatism of electing a more moderate Democrat who doesn't necessarily agree with all of their policy positions over a conservative or more conservative candidate. And so that pragmatism isn't lost on youth. It is definitely not ideal, and I think that you would see more youth mobilization in the general election cycle if a more progressive candidate was to be the choice at the primary stage. But I'll reiterate again, like, I have been impressed with that lasting engagement. It is, I mean, at times difficult to stay engaged in a candidate that you don't wholesale believe in, but it is much better than an alternative.
Yeah, and so Riley, did you find that your level of engagement was, did you find yourself just as able to throw yourself into electoral stuff, or did you find yourself with, I love your word, Andrew, suboptimal candidates? Did you find yourself like thinking, oh, well, I'll do some other things too, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this election cycle was so unique.
We can't hear
because
you.
Obviously,
are you muted?
No.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I think this election cycle was so unique because obviously we were facing an existential threat to democracy. And so I think certainly in terms of the presidential, I felt just as invigorated and just as, well, not just as excited, but equally sort of willing to do the work for Biden, because I recognized again that the alternative was so horrible. And I think in the Senate as well, it was similarly, okay, well, we'd still rather have a Democratic majority. We'd still rather have, these candidates who are at least willing to listen. And I think that so much of it comes down to that is it doesn't have to be the perfect candidate as long as they're willing to listen to youth views and as long as they're willing to sort of work with us. And so trying to elect someone who, had at least those possibilities, I think I was still pretty excited about, and my peers were as well. But also, as you're saying, I think I definitely felt the need to double down and sort of continue to work locally and continue to do all those other things, realizing that change doesn't just have to happen on the national level and that it's equally important for us to do everything we can here in Maine, regardless the outcome of those elections.
Yeah, and there were definitely some wonderful victories, in Chloe Maxman in Lincoln County, who was our guest last week. Which is incredible that you guys have stayed so engaged and are able to see that, this sort of pragmatic, like it's better than the alternative. And, we have to, somebody said the other day to me, we have to go from resist to insist. We just sort of have to be out there and insisting on, that they do the right things. Because I'm sure it was a huge disappointment that, like, when Biden came out and said, no, I believe in the whole thing about fracking. And, it was like, no, I'm not against fracking. And, oh, I'm not going to get rid of fossil fuels. And, like, he said it and then he backed away so fast. So what did you think about that? And where do you think the avenues are for the pushing or for insisting right now?
Yeah, I think that's such a complicated question. And I think, we've seen over the past 4 years what divides our country. And one of those things is fossil fuels. And I don't know, I think when Biden started talking about, not banning fracking, my immediate thought was like, oh, he doesn't actually mean that. He's just trying to win. And I don't know if that's completely true or not.
That might be true.
But I think, all we can do is to continue to do that insisting and to continue to do that work. And I think too, something that I find really special about the youth climate movement is that I think it sees the legislative and policy route as one way to create change. But I think there are also so many other ways to create change that the youth movement is willing to do. And so I think you know, what Biden says isn't the end all be all of what's actually going to happen with fracking and things like that. So I think it's annoying that he said that, but it's not necessarily unexpected or all that disappointing, at least to me. I think there's still a lot of hope for the work.
Yeah, well, and I agree, and it's such an important thing to say. You know, there are many avenues here. You know, and you, all of you, are amazing at figuring out those avenues. And that said, here's this is like, you know, my worry, my perspective is that and I want you to talk me out of this, is that I worry that the political engagement, the electoral engagement, because it is, as Andrew, you said, it's sort of gross. I mean, you know, the amount of money, and, you know, I mean, I saw it firsthand and it was awful. But I feel like the engagement of young people, probably least so the climate activists, right? You guys are the most engaged, but I think across the board, to me, it feels so fragile. It feels like we said, no, come on in. You know, the water's fine. Like, come in. And then, you know, and then when people say to me, you know, and my own children, young people say, all right, well, and it is true, we won some good things, and, you know, but so is it that fragile, or are people, you know, like, and I'm not sure it would be a terrible thing if everyone just said, you know what, we're just going to work on local initiatives and actually making this happen and walk the walk and forget the, you know, but as someone who's involved in electoral politics, I'm like, don't go too far, you know, we're going to need you. But what does it take? And are you worried about that fragility, or do you think people are sort of in it to stay and they'll be, you know, the next cycle, they'll be right there?
I think I'll take a stab at that one. I think for me, what I see as the best avenue for lasting engagement in the climate movement overall is this more community level engagement. So whether that looks like, you know, starting community gardens in your town, or like helping your town municipal council like start a climate emergency, or things like this that can kind of be ongoing conversations in your community, are the types of things that promote lasting engagement for climate activists. And then when electoral politics come along, I've seen an impressive kind of shift of attention. Like, people recognize, like, okay, this is important. Like, let's work on this for a couple of months. And do what we can to influence this process, noting that, like, why we got involved in the first place is to change the face of our community and to change our community approach to issues of climate. And so I think, like, anyone who's engaged at the community level, when the electoral season comes around, those issues are important, and those folks engage that way as well. But I think, like, really the thing that drives, like, lifelong activism of a sort is going to be those community projects.
Okay.
I think also, if I could jump into, I think on the electoral side of things, campaigns like Senator Chloe Maxman's campaign, I think, give me a lot of hope for that future too of continued engagement. And I think, you know, young folks running for office are so much more interested on the issues and being, you know, transparent about processes and running campaigns on conversations and really understanding their communities and the needs that their communities have. And so I think that gives me a lot of hope too for continued engagement. And I have a lot of hope for folks within, you know, the youth climate movement who are already interested in running for office, who are interested in creating, you know, good lasting change, and who are interested in closing that, you know, divide that we have in our country and that anger that folks have towards one another. Because I think, you know, at the end of the day, and Betsy, you kind of hinted to this, you know, most folks want access to good healthcare and a livable climate, and, you know, people mostly want all the same things. But it's, you know, a matter of leading to that understanding and compassion for one another that I think the, you know, youth running for office really brings me hope for.
Yeah, that is, well, and the whole idea of using, and this is one of the things that you all have done well, the climate crisis, the youth climate movement has done so well, is to use the process of running, when we make that shift, Andrew, you were talking about, but to use the process of running as a tool itself for education, for engagement, for doing community outreach, and not just for, okay, let's get this person elected. And that's one of the things for me that was so disappointing with the national level races, both here in Maine and nationally, was, there was not an effort to build, it seems to me, any infrastructure or to leave a lasting thing so people then can make that switch. And Riley, you've made that switch so many times and so often, so tell me a little bit about what it's like for you when you say, because you're very engaged in your community and then you become very engaged in the elections. So what is that like for you? And what's a well, I want to say a hint, or is there a nugget that we can take from that we can bottle and sell or give out to other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about sort of the youth climate movement in general and also our engagement in electoral politics, I think one of the things that we also as a youth movement are really good at is recognizing that there's a place for everyone and that there's a place for all sorts of talents and all sorts of folks and all sorts of interests. I happen to be definitely a very campaign focused person, both electorally and not. I like having a goal. I like reaching it. And so I think that definitely has allowed me to be a person who can make that switch and get really excited about something that has a firm end date and a firm sort of exciting, reachable goal. But at the same time, there are so many other folks who really love doing that sort of base level outreach and building that groundwork and sort of creating that infrastructure. And I think that is one thing that we can certainly take away from the youth climate as a whole, is that everybody has a place in this movement, no matter what their interests are. And some people happen to have multiple of those interests, and some people are just really good at one thing, and we need all of it, and all of it is so important. And that sort of, I think, makes up a lot of the magic that makes the youth climate movement tick, for sure.
Yeah, and tapping into that, I think, is so key. I remember when I first got involved in politics and I was managing a congressional campaign here in Maine, I had a person come to me and they said, Betsy, I'm never going to knock on a door. I'm never going to make a phone call. I'm not even going to stuff an envelope, but I will go mow the candidate's lawn and I will make sure that their garbage gets taken out. It takes it all, right? So I think that's a really important piece to that idea that we value everybody. So let me ask you a question. Do you, in this past cycle, did you feel valued by the campaigns? Let's be honest. I mean, this is what I worry about. I worry that people say, and I do work with elderly, and they're like, yeah, everyone loves us for their brochure in November, and they want us to help them get elected, and then bye-bye, and then so do you feel like there's enough of created enough of a connection that you don't feel used, or do? I mean, where are you on that?
I think that's a really great question. And I think when we look at the Senate race in Maine, I think young people were really left behind when it came to understanding their real needs and values moving forward. And I think, that's not necessarily a fault of Sarah Gideon herself, but more of just the campaign strategy that the Democratic Party was using to really just try and win against, that's really what they were trying to do, was to win.
Right.
And while that's important to want to win, I think, the needs of a lot of groups got lost, not just youth, in that process. And I think that really harmed the campaign in general. And I think, that lack of open dialogue and conversations that I think were so easy with many of the other Senate candidates. Like I know, Betsy, with you, we had many conversations with you about not only what our needs were, but also what youth involvement would look like after you got elected. Having a youth council, having open, communication and ways to get involved and advocate for what we needed. And I think that conversation wasn't there with the Gideon campaign. And it very much felt like, as you said, with the the elderly folks that we were being, used for an occasional, photo op or opportunity like that, but that our needs didn't necessarily get met past election day. And so, and I think, I have more hope for the presidential election and for dialogue with the Biden campaign moving forward. I think the Sunrise Movement has done a really incredible job of starting some of those lines of communication and advocating to keep them open. And so I have hope. And I have hope for future races too. But I think, this one in particular fell short.
All right, so it's unbelievable, but we're getting close to the end here. So, but I know, because we could go on for a long time. Maybe I'll have you back because you're all awesome. But so this is sort of lightning round, and Andrew, I'm going to start with you. Is there a thing that, let's say, Biden could do so early on that would make you and other climate activists say, yes? Okay, yes, we're gonna keep insisting because this guy gets it, or we're gonna stay engaged. Is there anything you can identify that would be like a thing that would make you be like, whoa?
Wow, that is a hard question. I feel like
Andrew.
I feel like as of right now, so many of Joe Biden's promises on climate have been just the baseline expectation, like things like rejoining the Paris Climate Accords. Like, yeah, exactly. These things they're no-brainers, and he hasn't really been talking about anything that he could do in his, say, first 100 days that would like make climate activists.
Okay, so let's say you have a direct line to him. What do you want him to do? 100 days. That's a great way to frame it.
I think the idea that first comes to mind is the one that Ania just mentioned from their discussion with your campaign, which is to assemble a council of youth climate activists from across the country.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, there's one. Okay, Riley, how about you?
Set a better zero emissions goal. 2050 is too late.
Yeah,
do better. Pick a better year.
By then. Awesome. Okay. Earlier climate goal. Okay, Ania.
I think admit that the United States has been the biggest problem when it comes to climate change and its creation, and just I think admitting guilt is the first step to.
Right. Awesome. So taking some responsibility. So awesome. Okay. Well, we're going to make sure that this gets directly to Joe Biden and his transition team, so that they'll know what to do, and then we will give you all the credit in the world. And we are going to have to wrap up. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to each of you for being here today, but most importantly for the work that you do every day, for the hope and the optimism and the belief that you have in how we make this a better place. And I am really thrilled. And I think our next show is going to, when we talk again, it's going to be on how do we translate all these policies into everyday community conversations. And because I think that's our challenge and our hope. So you are awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for listening in. Please join next week when Chuck Kruger will be interviewing Hannah Pingree about all things about what's going to close out 2020 and what we can look forward to in 2021. Thanks for joining us. And thanks again to my wonderful young people. Take good care.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.